conquer in business. So it's going to be very in detail stream. I came prepared. I got a lot of notes for you guys, so it's going to be very educational, informative, and I want everybody to walk away with some takeaways as a result of the stream. Before we get started, if you haven't already, make sure that you like, share, subscribe, give a big thumbs up on that video. It's going to help me reach more people on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. So I really appreciate you guys. I'm glad to be back talking to you live and as in person as it's going to get, until of course I get to meet some of you lovely folks out there in person. So like I said, beating anxiety and conquering business. It's a pretty important topic I wanted to cover because one of the key problems that many entrepreneurs face while they're building and scaling their businesses is increased pressure and mental fatigue, burnout, and anxiety, and sometimes even depression, just based on the multitude of pressures that they face. So it's a very important topic, and I wanted to cover it at the request of a few folks. So like I said, yeah, it's going to be a deep dive. I'm going to be covering some science. I'll try to keep the science talk as light as possible, just to make sure that we get everything covered and I can get you guys the actionable stuff. So I'm thinking maybe about 30 minutes, could be longer, could be shorter, but I would just grab a quick snack. Hopefully you guys got some nice decaf coffee going. It's a little late in the day for most of us, at least in North America, and it's probably pretty late at night in Europe. So if you're in Asia, by all means, go nuts, get some coffee. All right. So as mentioned, this is focused on entrepreneurs. So I'm going to be covering how this problem in particular affects entrepreneurs and what they can do to fix it. So let's just go ahead and get started. Let's see. All right. So why is anxiety and depression a problem for entrepreneurs specifically, as distinct from the rest of the population? Well, firstly, entrepreneurs actually experience anxiety and depression at a rate higher than that of the general public due to the increased stress and pressure. So it's a very big a key impact in terms of mental health, and you're making complex decisions every day. There's a lot of moving parts and variables, and you got to keep your clients happy. Sales delivery, quality of the offer, although that stuff's got to be immaculate. And then also you probably have a team and people that you manage, etc., and you're dealing with their issues and problems, and the list goes on and on. So problem for entrepreneurs. So I'm going to break it out. I'm going to start out with the type of problems prolonged anxiety and depression can cause for business owners and entrepreneurs, and then just move into the hyper applicable solutions. So in terms of problems caused, and I'm just going to share my screen. You guys know I like to come with the notes. And I'll just make sure that I'm not too far off the screen here. I don't have a ton of great options for visuals, but I'll flip back and forth. So problems caused, right? So the first area this causes a problem for entrepreneurs is in the area of revenue. So we're looking at things like decreased productivity and efficiency, difficulty in making decisions and taking risks in a timely fashion. As we know, when we're building and scaling a business, if we're already at six figures, increasing the amount that we're bringing in at in the 6 and 7 figure range involves a lot of very timely decisions, and you have to take calculated risks. So if you're suffering from anxiety and depression, it can affect your ability to make those decisions and accurately gauge the risk reward of certain business moves. So of course, all that can play out in your bottom line, the amount of money you're taking home, and your profit. So next, scaling business. So difficulty in focusing and prioritizing tasks. I've been there, somebody who's dealt with severe bouts of anxiety and some depression in the past. It can make it very difficult to focus in on key areas, and you have all of these competing priorities, or it seems that they're all competing. It can be very difficult for you to streamline, get everything kind of organized in a nice, neat row, and the emotional overwhelm and the impact can seem much more significant and severe when you're having trouble focusing and prioritizing. Other challenges in terms of scaling, like you're managing a team, you're leading people, and that just really adds an additional layer of complication when you're dealing with anxiety and depression. and that leads to a decreased ability to trust. But it's not just like the business aspects of it. It's really the impact is across the entirety of your life. So that's like work-life synergy. You'll have problems balancing your work and personal life, and stop me if you guys can relate to any of this, because I know I've been there before. Difficulties balancing work and personal life. You end up with like poor quality of sleep, maybe insomnia, or maybe you have poor sleep quality induced by your anxiety. You live in a constant inflammatory state, whatever. Increased worry, inability to focus on what truly matters and impacts the business the most. And then the important one is, it's decreased motivation and enthusiasm. Entrepreneurs, they're very high spirited people. They show up with a zest and a zeal every day, and they really want to make the most impact, help the most people, and obviously, make the most money. It's a very important part of why people start a business. So when your motivation and enthusiasm's in the shitter, or down the tubes, it can be very, very difficult for you to, create that work-life synergy, make those important decisions in your business, and just keep everything on track and keep yourself feeling well adjusted. Then personal relationships and enjoyment. So you might have difficulty maintaining healthy personal relationships. And in terms of enjoyment, a decreased enjoyment and satisfaction in your work and your personal life. And, you might be concerned like, hey, I'm really worried if I go leave the business or step away to go enjoy time with friends and family, or, go to a networking event or a conference or whatever, things are going to go tits up, and everything's going to collapse without me. That's one frequent worry that many, especially like, so I wouldn't say solopreneurs, but a lot of people with, let's say, high ticket offers that have a very small team, or like a relatively new team that they've just hired on, they can experience that concern as well. And, beyond that, just like the physiological effects of anxiety and depression, like, brain fog, constant irritability, rapid and wild mood swings, like I said, inability to sleep, and just like the potential deterioration of your relationship. So it's like something super serious, and it's something to be taken seriously, and different people have different, they have different levels of anxiety as well. So, some people, they have acute anxiety that kind of comes and goes based on the situation that they're in. And that's normal. Some people have sort of semi-acute phases where they're super stressed for a period of maybe a month or two or something due to external conditions. And then other people, they have sort of this prolonged depression or anxiety, and they have a serious problem they need to get taken care of. So all that said, those are the impacts that entrepreneurs can experience with anxiety, and why it's important to get that shit, excuse my French, to get that shit dealt with as soon as possible. I like to be relatable. So yeah. So with that said, let's get on to the possible origins of anxiety and depression. I think my personal stance, being someone who had to educate themselves on all of this stuff, it's very important to have some kind of idea of what's going on in the body as you dive into the details of fixing your health. Working with somebody like myself, who's a health and focus performance coach, that at least a little bit about the pathophysiology of whatever it is you have. Takes some of the power away from the doctors, gives you more personal authority and ability to make decisions, So, so possible health origins, or etiology, which is the fancy scientific term. So there are multiple existing theories as to what can cause anxiety and depression. Now, keep in mind, a few of these, some may be considered to be offshoots of the same theory or related by different people. For example, somebody may be genetically prone to anxiety or depression, but it's triggered by social events, or, like prolonged social events or environmental stressors. Others may be more purely genetic. I will try to cover the background aspects of the possible conditions quickly for you guys. It might get a little science heavy, but I'll try to breeze through it so we can get to the solution. So firstly is the monoamine hypothesis. So basically, this is like, I'm going to try and keep it super simple. Everybody knows you have these chemicals in your brain called neurotransmitters that do all of these different things, like dopamine, that increases your drive and your desire to acquire resources and skills, etc., in the motivation of an anticipated goal. There's serotonin, which is more of like the rest and digest relaxation neurotransmitter. I'm sure everybody's seen those TikToks and Instagram reels about, oh, let me get some serotonin. Check out your daily dose of serotonin, looking at this dog, dancing around in the living room, right? So that's kind of serotonin. It's like the I have enough feeling, like things are good. So the monoamine hypothesis involves those brain chemicals that are typically transmitted between neurons, but do other things in the body as well. And they're made out of actually amino acids. So I know everybody's heard of amino acids, but they don't always figure in exactly how it can impact your brain. So just briefly, monoamines contain something called, things like histamine, your catecholamines like adrenaline, dopamine, noradrenaline, and then your indolamines, which are serotonin and melatonin. So melatonin is actually created from serotonin. So if you're deficient in serotonin, your melatonin production might be in the tubes as well. So that's why people who have, let's say, depression or anxiety due to a decrease in serotonin also have a very hard time sleeping well. So basically, if it ends in amine or nin, it's a monoamine. I'm not going to bore you guys with the chemical structure because we're just going to get into it. But just briefly, if you want to take a look at the visual here, you make sure, yeah, I've got it on the screen. So this is an image of two neurons communicating essentially. Over, I think you guys can see my cursor here. So you have the sending neuron and the receiving neuron. And the sending neuron has something called an axon, which is like this kind of tentacle that expands out of the neuron. And it's got these little terminals here that communicate a signal, which is happening over here on the right. And then the receiving neuron has something called a dendrite, which is basically just like if the axon is the male end, the dendrite is the female, the receiving end. So neurotransmitters are sent across that gap, and that's what's called neurotransmission. And if you look on the right here, you'll actually see, you can see, you got your neurotransmitters that are being stored up in here. Signal comes through, they get released, and then they go into like these parking spaces in the receiving neuron. So that's neurotransmission, and there's a variety of different things that can go wrong here in terms of like mental health issues. But I'm going to get into that in just a minute. So you have all of these monoamines, and these guys are transmitted through these axon and dendritic connections, and it's called this is a synapse over here on the right, and this little space between is called the synaptic cleft. So neurotransmitters are sent across this synaptic cleft, and they basically think of it like little cars, these little blocks, and they just go ahead and park over here in the receptor, kind of like going to the movies, right? They're going to park there for a while. They're going to go see a movie. They, they might give it like a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. And then eventually you're going to have these transporters pick those guys back up and bring them back into the presynaptic cleft for, restorage. Like the car going back into the garage, right? So the monoamine hypothesis is essentially there's some kind of deficit or inability of the brain or the systems of the brain to either produce adequate amounts of these monoamines, so like dopamine or serotonin or norepinephrine, noradrenaline, whatever, and it causes a chemical imbalance which leads to the anxiety or the depression. So and the reason why that's important is there's a variety of different reasons that can happen. Typically, a lot of the times it is genetic, but it can also be caused by environmental factors. So that's one theory of anxiety, depression. And the second theory is actually genetic. So the reason genetics relates to this is a lot of that stuff is governed by either just like your genetics or what's called epigenetics, which is the changing of your gene expression based on environmental factors, essentially. So the monoamine hypothesis is the main thing that people target when they are treating anxiety and depression. That's what medication is for. But we'll cover those medications in a little bit. Genetics, next possible reason. So actually one meta-analysis, which is like an analysis of a major collection of studies, actually shows that the influence of genetic factors could be around 30 to 40% could. I've got a link here. I'll include it in the description of the video. So with that, what is it that's actually impacted? Like when we say anxiety or depression is genetic, what exactly are we talking about? So there are probably many more genetic sources than there are theories. So genetics is a major driver of our neurology, and the pathways of our brain interact with one another in lots of different ways. Key concepts to think about include like genes that impact the levels of your neurotransmitters and the ability of those neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin to effectively bind to those little parking spaces we were talking about up here at the AMC movie theater. So, so all of that is governed to some degree by genetics, and then there's also like environmental factors and let's say like long-term dietary things, etc. Right, exercise and so on. But there is a variety of different genes that can impact a person's likelihood to experience anxiety or depression, and I've loosely grouped these together. Again, guys, I'll try and speed through the science, but I know there are those of you out there who'd be interested in learning about some of this. So to keep it brief, there's certain types of genes. So genes expressing enzymes. So if there's an enzyme that's supposed to create something or catalyze something, if you don't have enough of that enzyme, can prevent the proper creation of neurotransmitters, neurochemicals. So TPH1, TPH2, TH gene, transporter genes. Those are the guys that let's say the person that, I'm not sure how to fit it into the car analogy, but that's your ability to like drive the car back home to the into the garage up here. So sometimes those guys are actually overactive, and they take things out of that area between or out of the receptors or whatever too soon. So there's not enough neurocommunication going on, neurotransmission going on, and that can affect your serotonin levels, your dopamine levels, your norepinephrine levels, GABA levels, and other stuff like that. Other things, breakdown genes. So genes that govern enzymes that like break down your neurotransmitters. So if those things are overactive, things like monoamine oxidase A, B, and then something called the COMT gene, those all break down different types of neurotransmitters. So these are genes expressing for the receptors or those parking spaces. Back it up. So those genes break down your neurotransmitters, and if they're not doing their job effectively, or if they're doing their job too much, too often, that can lead to imbalances as well. Other genes include how big are the parking spaces, how many are there, how long are they able to retain the car that goes in there, etc. Also, genetic abnormalities govern your immune system responses. So things like autoimmunity, and then like just general other genetic abnormalities, right? So two other ones, BDNF gene plays a role in the growth of brain cells and survival of brain cells. And something called HLA genes, which are related to autoimmunity. Autoimmunity can also be triggered by environmental toxins. In summation, it's very complicated, but don't worry, right? Because we're going to get to the solutions. Next theory is psychosocial stress and pituitary axis dysfunction, hypothalamic pituitary axis dysfunction. I know it's a mouthful of a phrase, but psychosocial stress, it should sound pretty familiar, right? It's the stress that's generated by a regularly occurring interaction in your social environment or the lack thereof. So regular prolonged psychosocial stress in your friend, family, or work groups can cause changes in the expression of your neurotransmitters, the receptors, via epigenetics. And also just like prolonged stress, it just puts you in like a fight or flight response, and it changes how much cortisol your body creates and how often. Other things that could do this are like prolonged periods of isolation or loneliness. You end up feeling super stressed all the time, and that's considered a form of psychosocial stress. And that eventually leads to a dysfunction in the system that produces cortisol. You never get a chance to cool off, and it's known to change your gene expression based on the environment. So number 4, making sure I'm still in the health origins part, something called sickness behavior, which is essentially just like prolonged inflammation and post-illness. And then number 5 there are many causes that we just don't even fully know about yet. And that's the real talk. You guys know I'm always going to keep it real with you here. The fact of the matter is, there are many possible dysfunctions in the brain and body. We barely understand them, and that could possibly cause anxiety or depression. So, for example, like the gut brain axis is a relatively new thing, and that may potentially be a major culprit for some people based on their diet, their genetic factors, whether or not they were breastfed, if they were, C-section, when they were born, etc. So, lots of potential problems, right? But there are plenty of outlets and possible solutions out there you guys can use to gain a foothold or even diminish or reverse these things. So, with that said, I've covered all the science talk. So now it's time for the practical solutions, which I know is what you guys tuned in for. So I did promise I am a man of my word, and here are those solutions. So, as entrepreneurs, we have a vested interest in maintaining control, right? So, in the case of anxiety and depression, there are tons of variables that you can take advantage of. This whole conversation should be an empowering one, because the main, let's say, takeaway you should have is that all of these different variables that you have control of can affect and change the way your brain functions, whether it's like acute anxiety or sort of something more long term, which is fantastic news. So, things like environmental factors, lifestyle choices, stress levels can all have a huge impact on your mental well-being, and like diet as well. So think about it in terms of the who you interact with, the what you're doing, the when. That's like, when you go to sleep and when you're in spaces with people for how long you're doing certain tasks for, the where, the environment that you're in, and the why. And that's like intrinsic motivation and things, doing stuff that aligns with you in a meaningful way. So here are some very simple and immediately integratable choices you can make to reduce or even eliminate your mental health concerns. So number one is prioritize sleep, guys. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. And I can't overstress how important this is. Once I started getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night, I'm going to say 8. My mood was much more stable every single morning. I felt very much more motivated to get up, get after it, etc. And it plays such a huge role in how we feel on a day-to-day basis. So it's possible to improve the quality and quantity of your sleep. You just need to make it a priority. Most people say, well, I don't have time for that because I'm busy trying to run this business. I'm trying to add an additional 10, 20, 50 grand a month to my business. Or even if you're, at scale, it could be even more than that, right? Looking to add 2, 3, 4 million this year, 5 million, 10 million. But improving and prioritizing sleep leads to a more positive and fulfilling, and importantly, energetically sustainable daily experience. So here are some ways that you guys can create a better sleep environment and improve your sleep hygiene to get those hours when you do get to bed. So firstly, number one, you guys have to stick to a regular schedule by going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, even on weekends. I know that's difficult for people to do because they like to go out, particularly Friday, Saturday nights. And I'm not saying you don't have to do that, but try to stick to as regular of a sleep schedule as you can. And that really helps influence your circadian rhythm in a positive way. Your body knows what to expect. It knows when it's going to bed and getting up, and it can just focus on doing what it does best, refreshing all of those systems, restoring memory assimilation, cellular repair, etc. Right? So number two, create a relaxing bedtime routine to help you wind down before sleep. I know a lot of people can work sometimes right up until before bed, or they eat dinner while they're working, and then they have like maybe 20 minutes to wind down before bed. Try to leave yourself at least an hour to wind down and relax before sleep, like sans computer, sans email, maybe hang out with your significant other, read a book. If you want to get if you want to get sort of woo-woo about, just light some candles or whatever, just do something that's relaxing, meditate. I don't care. Just do something like that. Next, number three, make sure that you keep your sleep environment quiet, cool, and dark. Super important. Ideal temperature is probably around 70 degrees or a bit below that, maybe like 67, 68. And quiet and dark, I think everybody knows why. It can, like if there's a lot of noise, you're going to have interrupted sleep. And if it's not dark, your body's going to be getting sent the wrong signals from your environment. So in keeping with that, number 4 is actually avoiding screens and bright lights in the hour or two before bed, as they can actually disrupt melatonin production and interfere with sleep. And the reason for that is, you get these signals through your your retina. It accounts for different colors of the light spectrum, and different colors of light have different frequencies, which communicate to the brain what's basically going on in the environment. If it's daytime, if it's nighttime, there's a lot of sort of blue light frequency in daylight. Although daylight is like a full spectrum of colors, it includes blue. And that can sort of prompt your body to think it's daytime. And that's the reason why like looking at screens before bed is a bad idea. So, put away your laptop, put away your phone like an hour or so before bed, if possible. If it's not possible, you can actually, put on like a nighttime mode on your iPhone or your Android. And if you're on a computer, you can install something called f.lux. That's f.lux. And see if I can pull that up actually, because I have it on here. And I'm going to demonstrate live what that does. So check it out. So it's a real time. It basically, you give it your zip code, and then it detects what time of day it is and what the natural light output should be from daylight, in your environment. So if it's daytime, you'll have light up to what is it, like 6,500 Kelvin. And then as it gets later in the day, you're getting less and less blue light, shifting to more of a red light. And then you're getting less of that melatonin production disturbance. Let's see, recommended colors. I'm trying to get back to where it should be for this time of day. So, all right. So let's see. So yeah, next, number 5, limiting caffeine, alcohol, and nicotine intake, especially in the afternoon and evening. Whether it's a stimulant or a depressant like alcohol, can influence the quality and duration of your sleep, whether or not you wake up at night, and also things like how much deep sleep you get, how much REM sleep you get. REM sleep is typically when we're like processing and synthesizing memory. Deep sleep is like tissue repair, cellular recovery, etc. Right? So if the quality of those things are reduced, then you're going to feel like more shitty in the morning. So, and then in keeping with, actually should add this on the lights. So consider using red light in the bedroom after sundown to avoid suppression of melatonin, and that actually helps as well. So by making these changes, you can actually rapidly transform your daily experience, improve the quality and quantity of your sleep, and a good night's sleep can lead to increased energy, reduce stress, improve mental health, and help you guys entrepreneurs perform at your best and reach your potential. So that's the first one. The next one is regular exercise. Yes, you guessed it. I know some people bristle when I say that, and they think, when do I have time for that? But physical activity releases endorphins that can help boost your mood, reduces pain sensation by engaging the opioid system. I know everyone's heard of opioids. Yes, there is a natural system in the body for the production and use of opioids. And your body will do this on its own. It doesn't need drugs to do that. So by exercising regularly, like cardio, weights, whatever, engages the opioid system, brings pain relief, and increases those feel-good endorphins, right? Increases dopamine, increases norepinephrine, makes you feel awake, increases blood flow to the brain, and it actually increases something called BDNF. So that's brain-derived nootropic factor. And I know that sounds like a pretty intimidating phrase, but basically brain-derived, right, of the brain, nootropic factor, nootropic creation, right? So what it does is it increases, to some degree, neurogenesis, which is the creation of new brain cells and also, or neurons, and also increases the numbers of synapses or communication points between your neurons, and also the ability of those things to function, and increased vascular health in the brain, so better blood flow, etc. And all of these things, they improve your ability to think clearly, to process and store memories, and also provide some protection from things like Alzheimer's disease, and of course, depression and anxiety. So exercise every day. I recommend it every day. And whether that's cardio and weights on alternating days, there's nothing wrong with doing cardio the first thing every day. And I really kind of recommend that. But either cardio or weights, I actually will alternate days. Just make sure you really get that blood pumping. And in line with blood pumping, I actually have talked about this thing on I think it was on Instagram, basically. So there are these vascular, vertebral arteries, which come up, and it's called vertebral because it goes along where your vertebrae is in your spine, and it comes up through the back of your head and wraps around the sides. So these are pretty major arteries that deliver blood flow to your brain. So what you can actually do is you just take your hands in the morning. I'm just gonna take these off for a second. Just take your hands and kind of brush up, take your thumbs or whatever, brush up behind your head and around the sides, and just do that maybe 2, 3, 4 times, and just really massage those arteries to get the blood flowing through your brain. And it really does wake you up pretty damn quick, and it creates a bit of a clarity of thought, and better cognition, etc. So you guys can add that on top of your morning routine. So next, number 2, eating a healthy diet. So healthy diet's important because a diet rich in nutrients can majorly impact your brain. So things like diets with omega-3 fatty acids, lots of B vitamins, folic acid, iron. I'm trying to think of other ones. These can massively improve the symptoms of anxiety and depression. So, namely with B vitamins, they're actually cofactors for the creation of those neurotransmitters, like dopamine, serotonin, etc. You need those vitamins for your brain to function. So make sure you're eating a whole foods diet, so not Whole Foods the store, although I do recommend that. Whole Foods as in actual individually bought items at the grocery store, and you combine them together to make a meal. So incorporating nutrient-dense foods into your meals is a simple but effective way to enhance your well-being. Things like salmon, nuts, and seeds. I actually like almond butter, for example. It's very high in monounsaturated fat, which is really good for you. And the brain's actually made up of a lot of fat and water, so you do need fats to have a healthy, functional brain. Also, leafy greens, lots of vitamins there, and the occasional fermented food, like maybe a yogurt or a kimchi, low sugar options are good. In addition to the mental health benefits, a whole foods diet also massively improves physical health. So when your body is well nourished, better energy, better digestion, stronger immune system, maybe even better sex drive. I know that's important, right? All these things combine to create a healthier, happier you. And let's see. Yeah, so without those essential nutrients, it can lead to feelings of low energy, brain fog, negative moods. And also, it's just a lot more satiating, meaning you feel more full. So you eat less junk, less crap. So just stay away from the processed stuff. Go for a whole foods diet, and you'll be doing much better. Next thing is, I think this is number 4 now. Seek professional help. So if you need a therapist or a counselor to also help you work through the situation, develop productive strategies to frame your situation in a positive but realistic way. So it's something called, what I do is called cognitive reframing, which is essentially, and it's kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy. You basically take a real look at the thoughts that you're having, the negative thoughts you're having about your situation, and you look at them from sort of a pragmatic light and question the validity of those things. So, I might think, if I'm having obsessive or negative thoughts, I might think, is this actually true? What evidence do I have that that's true? And then how could I look at this differently? And what is the actual reality of the situation? So you do these reframes. So instead of like, so such and such is the dick, for example, think perhaps instead, what evidence do I have that that person's a dick? And maybe they are, but what evidence do I have? And and that goes in like lots of different areas. Like, I'm concerned about this aspect of the business. Like, so and so's doing a really poor job of service delivery. But are they being given the correct tools in order to deliver the service properly? Are the systems in place for that delivery? All these types of things. So, of course, these are all aspects of, the daily life of an entrepreneur, but it helps you to avoid misplacing blame and getting negative before there's actual proof that you need to be so. So that's very important. And, when I went through like massive bouts of anxiety, this was a very powerful tool to kind of keep my feet on the ground. And it really, really helped me a lot. Like when I had all these just like overwhelming negative thoughts and I couldn't get it under control, I would just think, what is the reality of the situation? And what can I do with that reality that helps me in a positive way, right? So just redirect yourself. And the other thing that actually does that's super helpful is it actually forms new neural connections in the brain. So if you're somebody who's prone to negativity, you can actually reprogram your brain, and it's called neuroplasticity, basically encouraging your neurons to form new neural connections and fire in such a way that this new behavior or thought pattern becomes the norm. So super, super helpful tool to use. And it has actually like a neurobiological basis to it. And then, of course, lastly, number 5, consider medication. So antidepressants like SSRIs and NDRIs can be very effective in treating anxiety and depression. Every day that you lose to these, in terms of productivity, you lose to these conditions is like going to be a huge setback in your business. If you're trying to scale, add more to your top and bottom line. So medications can be a very powerful tool once you try it all, the lifestyle changes, the environmental changes, the social changes, etc. Like if you're eating a great diet, you're trying to sleep 8 hours, you're exercising every day, and you're practicing positive reframes, and it's still not working, medication may be the next way to go. So, and I am going to include here just like a list of different medications that you can use. And according to like the different types of anxiety. So remember, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's more of like an introductory one. And guys, remember, this is not medical advice. So make sure you work with a qualified medical or a psychiatric professional when considering meds. So, and I'm going to share my screen just to show the list. So general anxiety disorder, medication classes to consider include SSRIs like fluoxetine or Prozac, or sertraline, which is known as Zoloft. SNRIs like venlafaxine, aka Effexor, and duloxetine or Cymbalta. Atypical antidepressants like mirtazapine or nifazodone. And actually, beta blockers can be like, let's say, a performance anxiety assister like propranolol. And it can also be used in combination with, so it works more so for like performance anxiety, reduces that feeling of like, what do you call it? Like fight or flight response a bit when you have to give a presentation or you have an important conversation to have. It can also be used to augment the SSRIs and SNRIs, particularly with SSRIs. It's been shown in some studies to actually speed up the rate at which those drugs start to work. So interesting note there. Panic and social anxiety disorder. So I'll lose the screen here. Again, SSRIs, fluoxetine and sertraline, also escitalopram and fluvoxamine. I'm on escitalopram myself. SNRIs like venlafaxine and duloxetine, tricyclics, which are sort of the oldest form of antidepressant. So these can work better for some people than the SSRIs, but they're not typically a first choice because they are a bit dirtier, right, in terms of their mechanism of action, meaning they're less discriminant in what they're targeting. And they also have more side effects. So Not the first place you want to start, but it works better for some people than the others. Also, monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which are, I think they predate tricyclics actually, and they're not like what you would think of as a typical antidepressant, but basically these guys help prevent the breakdown of neurotransmitters. So there's things like, I don't know how to pronounce this actually, phenelzine, yeah, and tranylcycopramine. And then lastly, for depression, a lot of the same drugs. So SSRIs, SNRIs, same drugs, atypicals, mirtazapine or agolomantine. Agolomantine is an interesting one because it actually targets more of the melatonergic system or the melatonin system. And tricyclics again. Don't go for those first. And then, of course, the oxidase inhibitors. Just a quick note on monoamine oxidase inhibitors. Not typically a first choice because if you're eating like a protein heavy diet, for example, or like a very carb heavy diet, if you increase the levels, that can increase the levels of the neurotransmitters that you have. So let's say I'm eating very protein heavy diet and I'm on monoamine oxidase inhibitors. That can lead to like a toxic level of dopamine in my system. And that can lead to like neurotoxicity. And if you're eating like super carb heavy diet, that can lead to like serotonin syndrome. So it's very important to be careful with those. Guys, it's important to remember not everyone's get rid of that. Not everybody's experience is the same with medication, and it may take some time to find the right medication and dosage that works for you. So, and it should also always be combined with the other forms of treatment I mentioned, like start off with lifestyle changes, get more sleep, change up your diet, and make sure you're exercising, look into therapy, to get maximum benefit. And ideally you do those things first before you get on medication, unless it's like really bad, right? So I do have an even longer list of possible medications. I have like a mile-long list in my personal research dossier, if you will, but I can't list all of them here. So it's important to mention the medications may have side effects. It's best to always talk to a doctor or a psychiatrist before you try and start any new treatments. So, so that is the show. That is how anxiety and depression kind of begins, some of the possible causes of it, and 5 key and pragmatic solutions entrepreneurs can use to start to reduce their anxiety and depression and kind of get back to, killing it or crushing it in their business. Or if you just need a little pick me up, a lot of those changes can actually lead to a beneficial change in your neurology. And even for people who don't have anxiety and depression, guys, these things are super helpful. So if you don't need medication, right? Eating well, sleeping well, exercising regularly, doing this, can and will yield massive productivity and performance improvements and focus for just about every entrepreneur out there. So again, I want to thank you guys for joining me this evening to go over this stuff. I know it got a little heavy on the science, but I believe that every entrepreneur should also be a great researcher and also a seeker of knowledge as well. So the more information you have about what's going on with your system, the better equipped you are to deal with, doctors, to understand what's working and what's not working, and just basically take control of your situation, take control of your neurology, and get the best outcomes possible. So there you have it. Those are ways that entrepreneurs can beat their anxiety and depression and get back to crushing it in their businesses, scaling, bringing in that money, and just living generally the best life possible. So I want to thank you guys for joining me tonight, and do me a favor if you guys enjoyed the stream. I really appreciate it. If you like, share, subscribe, comment. If this resonated with you, or if you have questions, I want to hear from you guys in the comments, and I'll be happy to have a conversation. If you guys want to reach out to me directly, either with questions or if you want to set up a consultation, go ahead and hit me up in the DMs. I have a Calendly link in my Instagram and a few other places, and let's get that conversation going. Let's get your brain operating at its peak potential so you guys have the focus, the clarity, and the drive to crush it in your businesses. So That's going to do it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks for stopping by. Again, Josh, Rise Above Health, and I will see you guys in the next stream. Take care. Have a good night. Peace out.